Hey YouTube, it's me, Jim the Giant. So this is a response to Skallagrim's little rant on women in martial arts. And before I get into that though, I'd just like to say my position, and that's simply that I think that everybody has a right to learn how to defend themselves, whether or not they're male, female, young, old, able-bodied or disabled. And I think that pursuing martial arts as a career choice should be just as viable an option for women as it is to men. Now, only a few little caveats to that. I think it should be down to individual organisations to decide how much they pay their professional athletes. You know, if the female fighters are getting just as much of a viewership as the male fighters, they should probably be paid just as much. And if an organisation doesn't want to pay them as much, there's nothing stopping another organisation coming along which is willing to pay them more. And also, I think that if a martial arts group wants to be male only or female only, that's cool as well. You know, that should be down to the individual business. But in general, I think learning to do martial arts is something that everybody should have the opportunity to be able to do. Now, with that out of the way, let's get on with the video.
Okay, so lately there has been some talk about the MMA fighter Ronda Rousey and the idea of her fighting men potentially, and people have very different opinions on that. Some say no, that would be terrible, others would very much like to see that.
I'm actually a pretty big fan of Ronda Rousey. I think she's an incredible athlete, but that being said, she does have a habit of running her mouth and saying some really dumb things from time to time outside the ring. One of those things is her claiming she could beat up any man. This is clearly nonsense, but perhaps it serves as a useful belief to her. You know, if she thinks she can beat up any man, maybe that gives her the confidence to beat other women when it comes to MMA. If she believes she can beat up any man, she's definitely going to have the confidence to beat the women she's competing against. Now, that being said, certainly she's not going to be beating elite-level male MMA fighters, but put her against a local-level male MMA fighter in her weight class, and I think the vast majority of the time she'd end up beating them, and I think she'd stand a very, very good chance against elite-level male fighters who train in martial arts other than MMA if you had her fighting by MMA rules. Now, I would really enjoy seeing those kind of fights. I don't think it should be the norm, but having a couple of exhibition matches like that, I think would be a pretty cool thing. If she won, it would serve as something very inspirational to a lot of women, and it would also serve as a reality check for men who underestimate the importance of skill when it comes to fighting.
And overall, fighting women are an interesting topic, so let's talk a little bit about it. So whenever you mention women in any kind of martial arts, there's always going to be the objection that, oh, well, they are physically inferior to men and they're not going to be able to do very well in direct comparison because of the physical differences. Men are stronger and blah this and blah that. Okay, so obviously you cannot deny that the maximum potential that men can achieve in terms of physical strength is higher than the absolute maximum that is achievable for women. And generally there is the acknowledgement that in martial arts size matters to a degree. It is harder to fight against someone who is bigger and stronger, but there's also a lot of variation among men. That's why you have different weight classes in martial arts. So what I'm wondering about is, what is the problem with having unisex weight classes?
Even if you normalise the weight class, there's still quite a few problems with it. So, for a start, men are simply able to pack on far more lean mass at a given weight than women are if they train themselves hard enough. Elite-level male athletes in a given weight group are far stronger than female athletes relative to their body weight. Elite-level male athletes are far faster than elite-level female athletes, and they also have far more endurance. Testosterone also improves reaction time, it also decreases pain tolerance, and it improves recovery time, meaning that if a male athlete and a female athlete both train as hard as they can, A male athlete is going to be able to train harder and for longer because he's going to be able to recover quicker. There's also quite a few differences in skeletal structure, bone density, and that kind of thing. Sorry, but women are at a huge disadvantage even when you normalise the weight class. And even if that wasn't the case, when it comes to the super heavyweights, you're basically saying that women cannot compete because when it comes to the super heavyweights, where there isn't a restriction on weight, men are simply able to get far bigger than women are.
Where it really just depends on how you're built. It doesn't matter what you have between your legs, it just matters how much you weigh. And if you wanted to be really fair about it, if you wanted to have a competition that is entirely skill-based, then you would also have to take into consideration how they perform. Then you would have classes according to not only body weight, but also how much they can bench press or whatever, measuring their physical capability and then putting them into fair matchups. And then you can see whoever is most skilled. In that case, males and females could totally compete with one another if you set it up in such a way.
Why, there's a lot to respond to in that little segment. Okay, so the way that martial arts is split up at the moment in order to have fair competition, there's basically 4 factors. Now, some martial arts do some of these, but not others. But these 4 factors are male or female, weight class, disabled or able-bodied, and finally the level they're competing at, be it local, national, or international, etc. It's not a perfect system. I do have a few issues with weight classes. There's a few problems with having weight classes. That would be a topic for another video, however. But overall, it's a fairly good system. It's the best we've got at the moment. Now, if we were to get rid of sex and add, say, 10 strength classes to each weight group, you're basically going to have each category being 5 times as fast for competitors. And at the local level, that would quite often mean that people win simply by turning up, which is absurd. Already see that with my girlfriend doing powerlifting occasionally. Sometimes she'll win simply by turning up. But, I mean, it's less of an issue with that because it's about going in and getting the best numbers you can. It's not as intrinsically based on directly competing with another person like martial arts is. Secondly, you simply get people cheating. You see people who intentionally bench press about half what they can, just so they can fight against opponents which they know they can win against. So it would fall flat on its face based on that. And finally, if you're a 200-pound guy and you can only bench press 100 pounds, you're a crap athlete. It's as simple as that. You put in more effort and you can be a hell of a lot stronger. So yeah, it would fail in quite a few different ways. And, let's face it, would anybody want to watch 250-pound guys who are 60% body fat trying to fight?
And also, I'm thinking it would be interesting to have a mixed league where there are no limitations. Anybody can compete. Like, the scrawniest person can fight the bulkiest monstrosity of a fighter, and you can see how it goes. I mean, it's going to be fairly predictable for the most part, or so we would imagine.
I completely agree. I'd love to see more completely open fights where anybody can enter. It's really fun to watch these really mismatched opponents, and if you look at the really early UFC, yeah, that's what you saw. And occasionally you saw some pretty big surprises. You saw some tiny guys beating the living shit out of some massive guys. But at that point, it was style versus style. It was sumo wrestlers versus kung fu masters. It was boxers versus pure grapplers. It was Navy SEALs versus people doing karate, that kind of thing. And it was completely different to how it was today, and there was far less rules involved. And, I'd like to see a lot more fights like what the UFC used to be. But, yeah, those open fights, they have their place, but I don't think they should necessarily be the norm. Now, if you look at what the UFC is today, where it's become more of a science, people have realised what moves work and what moves don't, and there's a lot more rules in place, you'd see a lot less of those kind of surprises if they got rid of the weight classes. If you took a lightweight fighter and put them against a heavyweight fighter, provided they were both elite level, the heavyweight fighter would win nearly 100% of the time.
But it would still be interesting to see, like, if fighters were to compete who are at a physical disadvantage, how would that affect the way they train and their tactics? That would be pretty interesting to see, because obviously it is possible to beat somebody who is larger and stronger than you. There are, for instance, grappling techniques in many martial arts that rely more on positioning and breaking your opponent's structure, throwing them off balance, than overpowering them with sheer muscle force. I mean, sure, if you have two fighters who are equally skilled and one is stronger, then yes, the stronger one is clearly at an advantage. But maybe if we match up people of dissimilar builds, we would see different training regimens to compensate for that.
Now, if this was true, weight classes wouldn't have been introduced in the first place. If a smaller fighter could simply create techniques to use against bigger guys, which worked when they were of equal skill level, reliably, then you wouldn't have weight classes at all. Now, yeah, there are techniques which smaller guys can use to make themselves more likely to win against bigger guys, but if they're both of equal skill level, 99% of the time, the bigger guy is still going to win. Some techniques rely on throwing your opponent off balance. But the bigger guy, they're going to realise that the smaller guy is going to be using those kind of techniques, and they're going to compensate for it. Yes, those techniques work if there's a big skill gap, or if the smaller guy is extremely lucky. But if it was that reliable, weight classes wouldn't have been put in the first place.
But regardless, here's the problem of male versus female fights. Sexism. Yes, I know, some people will be rolling their eyes now, oh, this feminist bullshit again.
This attitude I would call radical egalitarianism. Of course, people should be given equal treatment under the law. Yes, as much as is realistically possible, people should be treated as individuals rather than based on their sex or their race, etc. But there's obviously exceptions to this. I'm not going to start dating a man in the name of not being sexist because I'm attracted to women. This is the same sort of thing. There are some massive differences between well-trained women and well-trained men. And to further illustrate the point, we should treat disabled people as individuals, shouldn't we? But it would be absurd to start having able-bodied people beating the crap out of people in wheelchairs in a ring.
But hear me out first. So the problem is, if there is a high-profile male fighter and a female fighter challenges him, he's not going to be very inclined to take that challenge. Because if he wins, most people will not treat it as an accomplishment. They will just go, yeah, well, of course the guy won over the girl. So it would be downplayed and there's nothing to gain for him. If he loses, then he's suddenly the biggest pussy in the world because, oh, he got dominated by a girl. How pathetic. To people who think like that, and unfortunately there are quite a few of those, it doesn't even matter what skill level is involved. If the guy loses to the girl, then obviously he must be a poor fighter, regardless. Just because he lost to a girl, so that per definition means that he is bad.
I don't think there would be any shame in male local level MMA fighter having the crap beaten out of him by Ronda Rousey. I really don't. She is a very, very good fighter. Now, yeah, I'm sure his mates would give him a bit of shit for it, but a lot of that would just be playful, shit talking. It wouldn't necessarily be serious, and there's no harm in joking about like that. There are some people who genuinely would look down on somebody for being beaten up by a girl, and that is wrong. When it comes to elite level fighters, however, if the male MMA champion in the equivalent weight group lost against Ronda Rousey, I'm sorry, but there would be some shame involved in that. He absolutely should be beating her in that circumstance.
And from the female fighter's perspective, if she loses, then she doesn't just lose as an individual, she loses on behalf of all women. That's how a lot of people would see it. She would basically have to fight as a personification of her gender overall.
Furthermore, even if this social attitude really is that problematic, I don't think that it would be up to the UFC in order to change that attitude. I think that should come from society in general, not the UFC to have to steer society in that direction whilst punishing athletes at the same time until that attitude changes.
So it's this kind of sexism that makes people evaluate the group rather than the individual. I mean, to be fair, that's not just a gender issue. People do that all the time with all kinds of categories. Oh, this person has light skin or they have dark skin, and this means they're going to perform so and so well in athletics. Or this person is from this region or from that region or whatever. People are going to do that anyway.
When it comes to differences in athletic performance between men and women, it's not that there's just a slight difference like that. They're basically two completely separate categories. I could take you, for example, and train you in powerlifting for 2 years, and as long as you are consistent with your training and had a decent diet, I could have you become stronger than any woman on the planet who doesn't take steroids. It's not like that with with people of different races or people of different nationalities. Yes, there's certain genetic traits which are more common among different races, and certainly more common when you look at very specific regions. But it's certainly not an absolute. A white person could certainly beat Usain Bolt in the 100 meters in the future. You're not going to see a woman beat him.
But that doesn't mean it's good. And if a male agrees to fighting a female, there may also very well be backlash from radical feminists who take this as a display of male violence inflicted upon women, and how this somehow tells people that domestic abuse is okay, even though that would be an utterly absurd connection, but that's how it goes on the internet especially. So the male fighter really has literally nothing to gain, only has something to lose.
Of course, connecting it to domestic violence is utterly absurd. It's two consenting people getting into a ring together. It's obviously got nothing to do with domestic violence. I would, however, say that it wouldn't just be radical feminists who have a problem with it. You'd also see more traditionalist people have a problem with it as well.
And on the other side, there's also a lot of pressure on female athletes. I've seen some absolutely disgusting comments on YouTube videos where you see the training regimen of a female MMA fighter, for instance, and it has nothing to do with gender at all. There's nothing whatsoever in the video other than, well, here she is training. And then you inevitably get comments like, why is that bitch not in the kitchen making me a sandwich? Or some random couch potato saying, I could totally kick her ass, even though I'm completely untrained in martial arts. Those assholes may think it's funny, but it's not. I mean, who would think about spouting sexist slurs on a video of a male MMA fighter training? It just doesn't happen. Nobody draws attention to the gender because, well, he's male, so that's kind of normal, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with you a fair bit there. There does seem to be a lot of abuse that female MMA fighters get, and a lot of couch potatoes who think that they can beat elite level women when they're completely untrained. I completely agree with you there. But a few counterpoints. Firstly, trolls will do whatever it takes in order to get a reaction out of people. If it came to male MMA fighters, they'd find some other way to criticize them instead to try to get a reaction out of them. And finally, you'll see that whenever somebody goes against a gender norm. You'll see it against female MMA fighters. You'll also see it against male gymnasts and ballet dancers and nurses.
And of course, people will also comment on her appearance. Like, oh, she is so muscular, that's so masculine. Oh, what a disgusting lesbian dyke, and bullshit like that. Is that what you consider sportsmanship? Really? Harassing athletes because of what they have between their legs? That's it? We're gonna judge them based on that rather than their actual athletic performance? This kind of shit really pisses me off. And what
I actually have a pretty huge problem with that myself, especially when it comes to female strength athletes. And the way they're treated, I think, quite often discourages certain women from getting into sports, especially sports where strength's very important. And this I do see as a problem. So yeah, female athletes, when they're doing their sport, they're doing it to be the best they can at it. They're not doing it to appeal to some 15-year-old boy's standards of beauty. They're doing it to be the best they can at their sport, and if it means sacrificing some femininity to their look, then so be it. There's still plenty of guys who'll find them attractive.
Also pisses me off that some people will be butthurt just because I had the audacity to point this out. In the eyes of some people, that is already going to make me a self-hating mangina feminazi or some ridiculous nonsense like that. Oh yeah, excuse me for not liking the fact that hard-working athletes are reduced to their genitals. How terrible and immoral of me, right? Would it really be so hard to be more productive about this? Maybe there's a way we can figure out in which females can train differently to push themselves to higher levels or to compensate for that.
I'm sorry, but strength, speed, agility, endurance, pain tolerance, bone density, those kind of things, they're always going to be hugely important when it comes to combat sports. Now, yeah, of course, skill's always going to make a difference, but the men can also improve in skill as well, and those physical attributes are going to make them better fighters, period. The only real way you can combat this and make women be able to compete on the same level as men is by giving them lots and lots of performance-enhancing drugs. But then again, if you let the women do that, you're going to be letting the men do it as well, and men on performance-enhancing drugs still outperform women on performance-enhancing drugs.
That difference. There is scientific research to show that throughout time, as gender equality has become more and more established, even though it's still not perfect, the difference in performance has actually decreased. Obviously, this is not the same as saying that females can reach the same maximum physical performance that males can, but it may very well mean that they are capable of doing a lot more if we just let them.
This is certainly true as more women get into these sorts of sports, and I do think more women should be getting into these sort of sports. Self-defense is just as important, if not more so, for women than it is for men. As you see more women getting into the sport and you have a bigger talent pool, yes, the gap is going to close a little bit, and is probably going to close a little bit more than it has at the moment. There's another factor in terms of why the performance gap's closing, and that's drugs. But this gap is unfortunately never going to come remotely close to closing completely.
By letting them, I mean maybe not telling them their entire life that their only purpose is to look nice and that they're always going to be physically inferior to men. Because while there are certain biological differences, there is also such a thing as self-fulfilling prophecy, especially when it comes to socialization.
Yeah, but sorry, the gap is never going to close between male and female athletes. And the elite level, there's going to always be a huge gap. At the average level, there's always going to be a gap. That's just reality. Now, yeah, women should be should have some confidence. They shouldn't, but they should be comparing themselves to other women who are in the sport that they're doing. If they're into MMA, they should be comparing themselves to people like Ronda Rousey. If they're into running, they should be comparing themselves to people like Kelly Holmes. They shouldn't be comparing themselves to elite-level male athletes and feeling bad because they don't meet that standard, in exactly the same way that a guy who doesn't take steroids shouldn't be comparing themselves to people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, yeah, I promote teaching realistic expectations. Yeah, I want people to be reaching their full potential, but they should have a reality check there as well. So that's all I've got to say. Thanks for watching. Comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.